Hello, everyone joining. See some people starting to trickle in. Do we dare do the cliche, tell us where you're from? Do we do that? You can if you want, guys. Tell us where you're from. Always good to know our audience. Feel free to put in, of course, if you're a customer, the company as well. It'd be nice to see if we've got customers joining today.
Just give everyone another couple of minutes, Phil, and we'll crack on.
Yep.
Hi, Adam. Ah, Chester.
Hello, Gemma. Nice to see you.
Oh, wow. Hi. Just launched this week. That's fabulous. Nice to see you. Heather. Lots of people joining in. We'll have probably a flurry and then we might as well.
Yeah, we'll just give it another more minute and then we'll kick it off because we've got lots to chat about. And we like to chat.
Morning, Ruth. Hi, Richard. Stuart from Northumbria, please. Hi, Stu. Hello. Hi, Adrian. Nice to see you again.
I think we've still got people coming in, but let's make a start because we do have a very packed session for you. So welcome everyone. Shock, we're going to be talking about skills today. It's not like I talk about skills very often, probably only, well, it is every day and pretty much a word I say in every other sentence at the moment. So the skills landscape is changing fast. So we know that from not just us saying it, but if you look at external research and if you look at reports, it is very clear that the skills we need today are going to look very different in our organization in 12 months, 3 years, even 5 years down the line. And this makes it incredibly hard for HR and L&D teams to start thinking about skills because for what you set up today can become very quickly outdated, and trying to solve that problem and not creating this big admin nightmare for yourself can be quite crippling. Or equally, you're maybe a bit mature in your thinking and you've created out a monstrous, really detailed Excel spreadsheet is typically what we see because the tech doesn't always support skills. And actually it becomes really complex, unmanageable long term, and becomes outdated very quickly. But also it's really confusing for managers and employees in your business to understand what this actually means. And it comes with lots of biases as well about self-assessment and what does a 2 actually mean? What does a 5 actually mean? All that sort of stuff. So maybe you're here today because you're focusing on the skills that you need in your organization today for business performance. Whether you're joining because you're trying to future-proof your workforce and think more about the emerging skills, and maybe you're just here today because you're weighing up whether skills is the right thing to be focusing on for you with all the other conflicting priorities and projects you've probably got as an L&D and HR function. We want to get really practical. We will be very straight talking. If you've ever been on a webinar before with any of us, you'll know that we'll just cut to the chase and we like to be kind of give you real practical tips. But regardless, if you take just one thing away from this, hopefully we've helped you move the dial in thinking about skills in a different way. And I always put the caveat of this is information. Use this as a soundboard to go away and do more research and speak to more people, but challenge your way of thinking as well. We've got the right people here today to have a chat about this. I'll introduce our panel in just a moment, but we've got a combined L&D experience of 51 plus years on this call. It's a very long time, I know. And we've got, we're not just ex-L&D people. We're still talking about this day to day with our customers, with our prospects, even internally, and getting going in a skills framework ourselves as Pallidus, as an internal team. So let's get stuck into it. Justin, do you want to give us a bit of an introduction to yourself first and why skills is important in your world currently?
Absolutely, thank you, Phil, and hello everybody. Good morning to you all. So my name's Justin Chave. I'm here. I'm one of you all, very similar to many of you on the call. So I'm in the L&D role within Calidus. My role is to nurture and support the talent within the business and ensure we have the right skills. Skills particularly of interest to me because I'm in it. I'm in the thick of it right now. I'm here. I'm trying to ensure that we're taking our people on the journey to embed skills, understand our skills needs, what we need to do, and for the future. And I need to, well, I'm relatively new to Calidus as well. So I'm in that stage of understanding skills, I'm understanding the priorities of the business and really how to get started with skills. So that's partly why I'm on the call. And also I'm a single L&D person in the business focused on the people. I haven't got a team or a department. So I suspect that correlates to a number of you on the call. But yeah, looking forward to sharing some insights with you all and answering some questions later. Thank you, Phil.
Decent stuff. And Sian, over to you. Who are you and what's your name? Where'd you come from? Why are skills important?
Okay, so I'm Sian Murphy. I'm the Customer Success Operations Manager. I know a few of you on the call and have actually already started to talk to you guys around skills. So my role is very much about driving value with our customers. And because of that, I'm having really good conversations about what organisations are needing, what the demands are on them. And, you know, a lot of people are talking to me, and Phil, you mentioned it before, about weighing up of where do I start? Where can I go to with this? And that's the reason that I'm here, so I can bring some of those stories from customers, but also being an L&D, I've done it, and it is one of those things that you need to think about what you can practically deliver and what outputs are going to come from, you know, introducing skills into the workforce. So yeah, that's why I'm here.
Amazing. And so myself, so Phill Lord-David, yes, it's my real name. I do get asked that quite a lot. I'm senior product manager here at Calidus. Essentially, my role is making sure that we're building out the tech to solve customer problems. That's the way I always kind of sum it up. But in regards to skills, I'm leading on the skills and vision for us as a product, but it's also a passion project. I've been that poor sausage that has had to try and build out a skills framework in the past. It was a 9-month project that I've still got a lot of battle scars from. That was actually one of those monstrous Excel spreadsheets that got created for 2,000 employees. So you can imagine how big that became. And then there was a complete reorg and it was outdated overnight. So yeah, bit of a passion project when it comes to skills for myself. We'll dig into some stats at the moment as to why skills are important right here, right now. But I just want to gauge where everybody's at in regards to their journey. So we've got a quick poll for you that we're going to bring up just to understand where you're at in that journey. Like I said, we want to get really practical and hands-on. So we've got lots of people that haven't even started and don't know where to start. We can really tailor the conversation to yourselves. And yeah, it'd just be interesting to see whether it also matches up to where we see a lot of organizations. So that should be launched now for you. Okay, results are in. So what are your thoughts, guys? It matches quite similar, I think, to what we're seeing a lot of the time, right? People trying to figure it out and just know where to get started, I think, is probably the most common theme. But we do see some people in a really good place, right? They've got a really robust framework out there that's long-standing and people understand it, but they don't necessarily have the technology to support actually getting going. So great. We'll really lean into then that getting started and trying to figure it out phase. So I don't want to spend too much on facts and data and research because I think it's really easy to get bogged down in this. But I think it's important to bring out some of that data and that it's not just us here at Calidus saying skills is really important and shop, we have a product that supports skills. You know, this isn't a sales pitch. But if we look at that first fact, World Economic Forum 2025, 63% of employees identify skill gaps as a major barrier. It's probably a fact that you've seen thrown around on LinkedIn lots, other webinars and that sort of thing. But Justin, what's your thoughts on that particular stat at the top?
I think the key here is just it's such an overwhelming challenge to figure out what it is you're after in terms of a business for your skills. So I can relate to this because I've come into an organization and I need to understand what skills do they have? What skills do they need for the future? So there's a piece of the puzzle here for an L&D person, is to get close enough to the senior leaders to understand what they perceive as the skill gaps, and also get close to the people in the business. How do I understand the needs, and how do I start to identify that? And that's an ongoing challenge, absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. And then this second fact here, John, I'll throw it over to you, because if we look at the global sentiment survey, of course, AI is up there as one of the top focuses. It's bound to be. But if you combine that with the other top two of upskilling, reskilling, and I think AI is actually quite an interesting one that it's up there with those two anyway. What's your thoughts on this? What do you hear from our customers in regards to kind of this fact?
Yeah, so in all honesty, I am speaking to customers of multiple sizes, multiple sectors. It's not one particular industry. It's not one particular type of customer who I'm talking to. Even in my professional networks as well, my L&D folks who I'm talking to, it's a real wide sphere of people who are very much starting to focus, or are being challenged to focus on skill gaps. And I think what's happening is the leadership are starting to talk to them about, where do skills come from? How are you meeting our skills gaps? What's the impact of those courses that you're running out? Where is the making sure that people can do their jobs right now, but also future proofing for the future, making sure that people are reskilling in a very fast-paced changing world. We're making sure that they are retaining staff, but making sure that they are skilled to be able to do the work that they, will be needing to do in the future. I think a lot of time the starting off piece is really funny, because the top focus does tend to be we're just starting, or we're getting to grips with it. And a lot of the time they kind of know the skills that are missing in the organization. Sometimes it's not formalized, but if you ask, the leadership, they tend to have a good idea. You speak to L&D, they tend to, HRBPs may well do. And the noise has always been there. That's always been there. So now this is about formalizing to a degree, but also being able to really demonstrate that business impact of having an alignment of skills and knowledge to the workforce.
Yeah, brilliant. And we're going to touch on business outcomes and business impact quite a lot throughout of this, because that is something that needs to be at the forefront. There's no point closing skill gaps and focusing on this if you're not going to be linking that back to business outcomes and personal performance, because people need to understand that connective tissue of, why should I be interested in learning this skill? What's the bigger picture here? And I really like, John, you mentioned something about a lot of the time we know the skills that are actually missing. I think that, if I remember, I'm going to try and come back to that, because I think that's going to be a great point later on to touch on, about what can we do with that information? How can we extract that and pull that into a really nice way of just getting going quicker, and utilize that information? So the final fact that we've got here was actually from some internal research that we did, specifically with our customers. And 85% of our customers rate skills as extremely important, important or extremely important in the next 12 to 18 months. And again, this just backs up, if you look at, I think it was the Realities of L&D Report 2024, it was something, there was a stat in there about 75% of organizations expect more or better skills capability from their technology. So it's not that this is all about kind of ways of thinking and trying to be, dynamic and kind of be really fancy and setting all of this up. There is a tech enablement here that, it doesn't solve all the problems, but it does play a big part in making this really successful.
Yeah, it's changing the landscape, the tech piece, isn't it?
Exactly. And it wouldn't be a webinar in 2025 if we didn't talk about AI, right? So here's our little piece. We won't go too much into this because it's a whole webinar in itself. We're not here to talk specifically about AI. But it is important when it comes to skills management. So if you look at the kind of AI maturity curve from the Intention and Reality report last year, it has put skills management up at the top as the most sophisticated and impactful way of using AI. And that's because it can do a lot of the heavy lifting for us, right? It can bulk tag content with your skills, because nobody wants to be tasked with going into hundreds, if not thousands of bits of content. and manually tagging that one by one, I know if I was tasked with that, I'd probably be sick that week. I won't lie. But there's also other efficiencies there, right? It can do a lot of the heavy lifting for you in regards to creating frameworks in seconds, suggesting skills to you that you've never even thought about that you might need or exist in your organization. It can support in mapping the skills. All of a sudden, we've got a world, the art of the possible becomes really efficient, and you can start things in seconds or weeks rather than having to spend 9-month, 12-month projects on this. So Sian, what are you hearing in regards to AI specifically in relation to skills?
Yeah, so AI very much is, and I suppose it's one of the ones here. Oh, apologies. Oh wait, can't hear me, can you?
Yeah, we can. Yeah.
Can you hear me? Okay.
Yep.
So one of the areas I would definitely say is around the analysis of data. It's driving the efficiency of the L&D department to be able to have data at their fingertips that then tells them what they're going to need to either plug the gap with, because let's face it, when you create a skills matrix, you may well have content that you don't have, and you may need to just do a very practical exercise. And AI can drive that by looking at that data and identifying it really quickly. So
yeah, nice.
A lot of the time it's about driving efficiency right now for people. And they're starting to dip their toe into, how that's going to look and feel with the skills management piece that you mentioned, like tagging. But that's the same thing. That's driving efficiency. That's not sitting there for the week doing the tagging. It's allowing another system to do all of that heavy lifting for you while you add value to the organization. And that might be about hearts and minds. It might be stakeholder management around the skills, talking to people, getting it out there. That's much more effective than sitting with a load of data.
Yeah, I definitely hear it still that there's still a bit of a fear in regards to using AI in any capacity, not just with skills. Because we're still learning it, right? We're still learning the power of it, and companies are starting to really trying to understand what data is being used and not used. And one of our key principles when we were building out our use of AI policy for us was a human in the loop, but also clear transparency. And we've always got an option. I think, yes, AI can improve efficiency, but while people are still in that kind of journey of are they allowed to use it, not allowed to use it, there always needs to be a fallback, right? And there always needs to be a way of still doing it manually.
It's a bit like when you had,
yeah, go on.
It's a bit like with the bring your own device policy,
yeah,
20 years ago, isn't it? It's if you don't have that policy in there, people are worried to grab their phone and have a look potentially, or you get into problem in the old days with data and things. That's one of the ones that I had. But having a great policy and thinking of that now, even as you start on this journey and having those internal discussions, they're going to pay dividends later on.
Yeah, I remember there was a real challenge about phones in the workplace when I was working in a call center, because people were worried that they'll start taking photos of customer data on the screen, and they've got, it's just a different problem in a different form, slightly different tech, and we've evolved since then, thankfully, of people having to put their phones in a drawer and we put under lock and key. Justin, how are you thinking about AI? Because like you said in your intro, you're on this journey from a Calidus point of view of introducing this. Where do you see AI playing its role? How are you managing that with us? I mean, I guess we're probably less scared of it because we're building the technology, we understand it more, but where's your headspace at in how AI can help you?
Yeah, thanks, Phil. Yeah, it's interesting you said, because there's definitely less fear within our organization, but I want to make sure I've got confidence in it. So I want to look at how we can leverage the AI to impact a broader audience simply and effectively, ultimately. So for me, it's around what can I do? How can I use the system to do the things that would take me considerable time, effort, and energy on a personal level? But also it's around how can the AI support me from that collaborative piece, because there's often quite a lot of work and engagement and involvement of lots of people with this kind of activity. But I think the AI can support us in how we can shortcut that approach and engage people still, but in a less time-consuming manner. So yeah, I really see a huge room to use it. But again, I'm on the learning journey as everybody else is with AI. So I'm learning and having to upskill myself in readiness to then be the sort of the conductor within L&D, trying to get everyone on board with this. So yeah, upskilling on for myself and for everybody really.
Yeah, cool. And I guess you being like a one-man L&D band, which will, like you said, will resonate with a lot of people on the call. I guess efficiency and saving that time is imperative for you, right? Because the more time you're spending tagging content, just as an example, the less time you are focusing on actually how do we make the business outcomes and how do we move the dial on those bigger metrics, right?
Absolutely, and it's around providing timely, relevant content to the people. And if I can do that with the use of AI and speed that process up, I'm adding value quicker and more effectively, and I can focus on some of those aspects where AI can't support me. I have to use that personal relationships kind of skills. So yeah, absolutely.
Amazing. John did make a really good point. Put comments in the chat, raise questions as they come up. We do have a dedicated section at the end for Q&A, but if stuff comes up as it's relevant, let's delve into them rather than just parking them all for the end. So what we see in regards to some of the key challenges that organizations face. And this did have a big impact on how we look at skills and how we support our customers with skills as well. Because this is kind of, I would describe this as 70% of the most common problems that we are supporting customers and that we hear in the space when it comes to getting going with skills. So number one is about skill frameworks. It's incredibly hard to try and build out a framework and have confidence in that. It's very time consuming. And as we mentioned earlier, it can result in these huge Excel spreadsheets that go out of date very quickly. But also it's hard to then transfer that over to your employees and make it really transparent and visible to them. Equally, you get the flip side where maybe because it's so hard to think about it, you get this real oversimplification of skills. And it's kind of like you've just got 10 skills that only 10 skills that exist in your entire organization, and that's it. That's the extent of the framework, and that's fine to be in that place, but people want to be evolving that and they just don't know how to do that. Number two is we really see that it's challenging, like I said, to put the skills into their end employees' hands and say, hey, these are the skills that you should be interested in. These are the gaps. This is where you're at versus where you need to be. And how can they find then really relevant content or learning interventions? Because it's not all just about content, right? You can read a book, you can still be coached, you can still get mentored to close skill gaps. But how do you bring that all together in a really nice way for your employees so that they have good transparency and it's not all just a top-down approach, but they can be empowered to go on that journey themselves? Number three is about talent mobility. That's probably the one that I think we hear the most. How can, as an organization, we get insight into all of this? Where can we identify the skill gaps so that we can be tactical and strategic in what skill gaps we need to plug? But equally, how can we be proactive in, if we can see that somebody isn't developing a skill, maybe that skill is going to disappear in 12 months because it only exists with one particular individual. How can we put something in place to reduce that risk? How can we enable succession planning and talent mobility and help people move from one role over here that's potentially completely abstract in a completely different department and role, but you've got the skills, so there's an opportunity there for you. I always use myself as a prime example, going from a head of L&D into a product manager role. On paper, I don't have that job title, but I do have the skills, or the majority of the skills that map to that. And that's a challenge, is how can organizations open up those opportunities without creating these real rigid and static career frameworks, which is a whole problem in itself, by the way, and take months, right, to even create. And the final one here is about confidence. A lot of this is about data and being able to spot that, but actually, how can you assess the skills and be confident that if somebody is an expert in the data, that that's actually true? Because if you don't trust the data because you don't have the confidence in the way it's been assessed, your data means nothing. And actually, you've got no real clarity over your skill gaps in your organization and how to close those, despite you putting all of that effort in. So that all led to us, for us, our vision is, and the way that we see skills, and we'll start talking about this more, because all of this feeds into how we propose that you should be thinking about skills. For us, skill development is unlocking both personal and business performance, and it all linking to having a large business, moving the business metrics and achieving the business outcomes, not just being an activity. And yes, we've got a short-term vision in mind, like I said, solving the majority of those problems. But for us, we want to be able to take somebody on that journey of being able to say that this learning developed these skills, that closed that gap, which improved their personal performance. And hey, that personal performance has now moved the dial on this business metric. I always describe it as connective tissue because it's really hard to bring all of that data and all of that story together. And that's where our vision is for skills, but it not being perfect from day one. We really believe that you should get going, start learning, building on it, and start moving the dial, regardless of how small, rather than trying to shoot for perfect from day one. So we want to introduce to you to the skills readiness journey. You will get a email tomorrow. Everybody that signed up, you're actually going to get a free ebook from us that's going to go into the skill readiness journey in a bit more detail, and it's going to delve into the different sections. But really what we're looking at is we've created this different way of looking at skills and all the things that you could do with skills in different pockets of kind of core capability. Now, I stress this is not a left to right model. We are not saying that you have to start with awareness and make your way through all the gates to eventually future thinking. And we'll delve on this in more. But what we are saying is these are kind of key areas that you can start thinking about skills and introducing skills and different activities. So you might just start in one of these kind of components, one of these pockets, and that's a good place to start for you maybe. But equally, you might be doing kind of a bit of a shallower version of all of these things in an isolated way. And we think by breaking it down into more manageable chunks, it helps take that big vision and that what is scary into something more manageable and smaller. Guys, what are your thoughts on kind of the readiness and breaking this down and that kind of fear of the big project that is skills?
Yeah, it's definitely one of the common themes when I'm talking to customers. And sometimes we have a real honest conversation about, okay, so where could you focus? Quite a lot of the time it's management, leadership, we jump to there, but also
Yeah, very common. Yeah,
it is, it's always going to be there. But I have also had a recent conversation with one of the customer success managers here who'd been on a call with somebody, and they knew that there was a large intake of people. So they have a cyclical uptake of people during the summer, and they knew that their interview skills were quite, substandard. They were, they weren't confident that actually they were interviewing in the right way, they were getting the first right impression, and they knew that this gap was here. A bit like you said earlier, it was a feeling, it was a known already. And actually what we started to talk about was, okay, start there. Start with that small business problem that you have already identified and be able to do some of the work behind the scenes. Very shallow, as you said, Phill. They are actually probably hitting each and every one of these. They really are, but not necessarily all at the same time, or not necessarily, like you say, in a linear fashion. But actually, it's about making a real difference to the organisational goals and also the workforce to be able to have those interviews. So they're going to get those people skilled up. And that's a very practical example that came up in the last couple of weeks.
Yes, I think that leads us on nicely at this first question. So let's let's dig into the weeds of this. I don't want to keep this at a model level, but I think it's important for us to frame this and understand it, because everything that we're going to talk about will fall into one of these buckets in some form. Yeah. So Justin, I'll hand over to you with this one first. How do you know you're ready for skills? What are some of the considerations for you here?
Thanks, Phil. Yeah, it's a great question, and it's one I'm sure everyone can relate to. So for me, it's around trying to understand what the foundations are at the moment of your organisation, or our organisation for Calidus specifically. So where are we? What are our people ready for? Are they willing and able to buy into skills right now? What's the learning culture like as an organisation? And no doubt be very different across the myriad of people on the call. How are your people going to buy into this? Do they understand why? Or is this completely, in terms of L&D maturity, is this a huge leap? And I think that's really important, is to kind of gauge where am I? Where are we as a business? A couple of other key points I think are really important is around credibility. So credibility as an L&D team. Do people trust what you're doing? Do they buy into your vision? Do they know what the vision is? And I think for me within Calidus, as this is good to talk about my specific situation right now, relatively new, so I have to build that credibility. I have to be visible. I have to get out in the business. I have to engage with people and start to listen and be available. And through that will come credibility. We trust what comes out of either Justin or L&D centrally, depending upon your view. And hopefully that resonates a bit with people. And then one other area I think is a really important factor I've been playing with is leadership, talking to the senior leaders. And when I see the senior leaders, I mean the true senior leaders. That in my case, it's the CEO, it's the exec team. Some of you may not always get that close, but it's around gaining access to those people, because they're the biggest voice sometimes to sort of talk about these things, to bring it to life. I'm not saying that those people will make people buy into L&D. Quite often it is the L&D, it's the managers, it's the culture that will, the people that will change that. But if you can have those at the sort of the top of the organization being able to confidently articulate what's happening here with what you're doing and what you're trying to achieve and how you're going to do it, I think that's really important. And so for me, in my situation, I'm there. I'm talking to those senior leaders. I've talked to Harry, our CEO, at length about this, and I'm at the beginning of this. But yeah, hopefully that's some good insights, Phil.
I think that makes sense, Justin, because if we think about what we said about even having those business outcomes when we very first started the webinar, that's the bit you're going to hook those people in with, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. It's about what is important to you, and for me, it's understanding what are the key priorities as the business, not the trajectory right now from what I'm sensing and feeling, but talking to the senior leaders and saying what's really going on, what's your trajectory in the future, where do you want to get to, and how quickly do you want to get there? And that's what's great about this, is we can start to play around with these skills to support pace if we need to, or to do it small in bite-sized chunks if that's the best approach. And I love that.
And it's almost like you set me up there, Justin, because this is a meaty question. So I want to focus on this for a little while. John, you've already mentioned a couple of bits here, but where do you start now versus bigger picture? So Justin, you've mentioned there about, for you, you do need that credibility, and it's going on that journey. That of course takes time. So how can we make sure that we're still going with speed, with the bigger outcomes still in mind, but still getting going now? Because I think that's what we see a lot, right? Is that people are shooting for perfection, that they want to roll it out in its perfect form to all employees.
Yeah.
They don't want people missing out or feeling like they're missing out or not understanding skills, and they create quite a lot of work for themselves. So what are things that we can do to get going with skills to have an impact versus still thinking big picture?
Yeah.
John,
So some of the things I've been talking about is really practical stuff, like when you're talking to your vendors, when you're talking to your internal design team, talk to them about the skills that is being satisfied by that particular module that's being created, or so you start to have a good picture of what your content looks like. And then if anyone who knows me, they will also know that I'm mad on governance. But being able to actually start to look at your training matrix, for example, and even if all you do is add a column to your training matrix or to your custom fields from within your system or whatever it may be, that actually identifies the skills now that you're having that conversation with, so that you're not duplicating effort when you get to the point where you have got a skills taxonomy, where you've got content against it. You are going to be able to do that. Tagging, we talked earlier about the efficiency piece, but you're going to actually understand your landscape really, really well. And that's a really small starting point. And I know it's a really tiny one and very practical, but actually, why not just do that anyway? Because let's face it, being L&D is about helping people to transfer knowledge and skills and be able to demonstrate them. That's what it should be, but it's not necessarily always been in the conversation when you're having that with the stakeholder who's requesting. It might be you add it to your request forms, if you've got that kind of diligence in there. Those sorts of really practical things are the tiny, tiny measures that you could start now with.
Yeah, I like what you said there about your TNA, even if you added a section in there about what skills is this developing, it starts a conversation. It starts people changing their shift from I just need this content, they need to
Big
know this
box.
thing,
Yeah.
to talking about the skills they need and why they need them and how that impacts, right? Just having that conversation is something that is probably a bit abstract for a lot of people already.
Yeah.
For me, I think going back to business outcomes, I think we're all in agreement that the only silver bullet kind of advice we would give of what never to do is never try and roll this out across your entire org with a fully fledged profile, with all the skills, with target levels, expecting to have all the content, because you won't get anywhere and you'll spend months doing that. With the rate of change, it's just not going to happen. Like, we need to think about this in a 2025 view of even question, is a skills framework in the traditional way that we've known it actually valid anymore? Or is it about get the skills out there and build on that? And as you identify more, add it to their profile. Equally, if they become outdated, remove it because it's not relevant for them anymore. But the more you roll this out and the more complexity you add to that, the harder, of course, it is for you to maintain longer term. So that is a consideration. Whatever you put in place, can you maintain it long term? If a consultant comes in and suggests you do A, B, C, D, and Y for this big vision, okay, when they're gone, can you support that? If you're a one-man band like Justin, or a two-man, three-person team, is that sustainable if the world suddenly shifts in 6 months' time?
Yeah.
So the example I always give is, let's take, for example, one of your business metrics is like ARR, right? You want to make more money as a business, right? That's one of your key metrics and key outcomes. The right place to start would be going, well, which people in the organization have the most impact on that particular metric? And then start there. So that might just be the sales reps, for example, or SDRs. It might be anybody that is in contact with a customer that might be able to upsell. If you were to map the skills to them as a starting point, not create a full framework, but just the skills that you think they need, leverage AI to maybe support you in that, assign them those skills, assess those skills, close those gaps, and see if the big overall metric starts to move. So that could be one place to start. Equally, another place to start is if people just don't understand skills and its role to play, assign 10, 15 core skills that are shared across everyone to everybody in your company, and start talking about that, and then build on that and layer it up over time. And I think that's been one of our key ethos is that anything you introduce, you should be able to build on as you learn more and not be scared to do so. It should be really quick and easy to do that as well. So if you were to map, I don't know, 25 skills for everybody in the sales department, and when you're ready, then say, well, this particular role needs these 3 additional skills. Tick, just map those out to them. And this other role needs these 5 additional skills. Absolutely fine, map that out to them. And you start thinking about it in a much more fluid way rather than that kind of perfectionism. So I think there's you can go job title specific, but you don't have to go there straight away.
Yeah, I agree. And I think the consideration of adjacent skills. So you talked earlier around this role needs this right now, but actually they also need to be able to do presentation skills, which also needs to be able to have PowerPoint skills. I know that seems like a really obvious one, but that's an adjacent skill that wouldn't necessarily be straight away that you would think of. So always consider those as well.
Yeah, I've just seen a nice question come through from Richard in the chat, actually, and I think it's quite prominent to this one here. So Richard said, I'm building out an L&D offering from scratch. What needs to come first, an abundance of content or the skills framework? I'm conscious of that there's a lack of learning opportunities for many of the skills.
Yeah.
I've got thoughts on this, but do either of you want to jump in on it before I do?
You'll probably go through it, Justin, actually, aren't you?
I literally am. Yeah, I'm in that same quandary actually, Richard. So I'm sitting in the space of, it would be great to have an understanding of a specific skill with a specific offering to enhance and develop that skill, and then work with a core area of the business, a core team, and follow that through so I can ultimately push that skill out, push that learning out, and see where it's added value. So it's a very relevant point, but I'm obviously happy for Phill to jump in and enhance on that one.
Just before you do, Phil, I was going to say that you need it the other way. It's a bit chicken and egg, because what you don't, and I'm sure Phil's about to say this, I'll probably steal your thunder on that, but you don't want to then go out with your skills and go, and this is what you need, and it be an empty desert of content. So you do need to strike that balance, and it isn't easy. It isn't easy, but you need to make sure that you have the right content, because otherwise people are going to lose that trust and faith in it as well.
Yeah, I mean, I was literally going to say chicken and egg, so you did steal it a little bit, but I'll let you off this time. I was going to kind of, first of all, say it depends where you're at in your journey. So if you've got a whole load of content already in your platform, map the skills to them. So, build out your, I guess you need to build out a framework, but that's where AI can play a good role in that, where you can create those frameworks in seconds rather than months. Then use AI to then bulk tag all of that content and see where your gaps are, and then say, well, this content doesn't have any skills mapped to it, so therefore is it relevant content, or is it that I just don't have the skill there? If you're starting the other way around, where maybe you don't have much content, I think you kind of got a clean slate to say, well, what's going to make the most impact? Is it that you want to build out content first without the conversation of skills, or is it that you want to start mapping out, do all of that together so skills is embedded from day one? I think ultimately I would always lean back to that it's about the skill. There is no point about just putting content and lessons out there and then figuring out what skills that supports, because you should only ever be putting out content into your platform and into your organization that supports the skills you need, that will then impact personal and business outcomes. So although I'm kind of on the fence with it, a typical product manager giving a bit of a vague answer, but always lean towards that the skills are first. What skills are going to move the dial and make the impact? And then clean slate it. If you've got a load of content in there that's not supporting those skills, get rid of it. Nobody's doing it, get rid of it.
Yeah.
You don't need content in there that nobody's
going to make a difference. Yeah, completely. Gemma's raised a really good point here, and actually quite funny. I was laughing then because I saw the gives her the ick. So this is around a contact of hers who is doing a skills mapping process and is absolutely being turned off by it. It's giving her the ick. It's all over the place for start. If you're in the industry, it is all over the place. But also she's really concerned about the amount of pressure people feel because they're constantly rated and it's all about the numbers. And that's that hearts and minds piece, isn't it, guys? That you know, that actually that's the positioning of it that's not quite right there. It's not working on the human element. And she's interested if you guys have any experience of pushback and ways of bringing that human side to it. Totally agree. Good. It is a good point. But what do you think?
I think if we go back to the readiness journey, number one is making sure that the business is bought into it and that people understand it, and you're thinking about who needs to come on the journey with you to support this. So don't make it a secret. And yeah, I do like it that it can give people the ick. I do like that. But I think that's where, if you're starting smaller, it kind of starts the whispers going out and people going, oh, that's working, that's cool. Yeah, and why don't we have that as a department? And then you can talk to them in a very business sense of going, well, we're trying to move this metric, so that's why we're focusing here. Don't worry, we'll come around to you at some point, the moment that it has had the most impact. And when we're really time strained, I think that little pockets of focus can really help, and it builds up. I think people do feel the pressure of having to roll this out org-wide to every employee, and then all of a sudden an employee's got this completely new metric that they need to feel pressured to close. And we know that there's those people in there that will go, I've got a skill gap. You're saying I need to be an expert, but I'm a basic, and they'll go click through all the available content to try and develop that skill. And it's not what it's about.
Should be about the conversation as well. It's around the piece that it's developing you. It's not tracking you. We're taking that data to understand the gaps in the business. But if you're transparent, like Phil says, and it informs both your content strategy, it informs your L&D strategy as you move forward. It talks about your performance management. It brings so many multiple facets in around developing the centralized person, the individual who this is for, and it's about them. That's a much stronger message than we're measuring you when you're only a 2 and a 3. That's a really, I suppose it's a bit like rating scales in Perform.
Yeah, And it's the what's in it for me, right? If they understand and if they can see, if we talk about that more fluid way of looking at talent mobility, if you can develop your skills and you can see in a platform of some sort that these skills give me the ability to do this role, all of a sudden you've got a really strong what's in it for me, because I can say, well, I want to become that role, and there's an opportunity I never even thought about. Well, I want to become the next CEO of Calidus. Probably like a 2% match in regards to my skill set. But at least then I can see these are the skills that I should be developing at, and at to what level, so I can start working and going on that journey. Because I think we've all felt that pain. And I think this is, again, it's towards the end of that complexity journey. But we've all been in that situation where you apply for a job, you inevitably get told that you don't have the skills or experience. You go away and try and develop that and hope that the role comes up again in like 6 to 12 months' time. It's about also trying to break that cycle. And again, it's how you position it within people so that you don't get the ick as a team, but also they understand it and don't feel like it's just another measurement.
Yeah, I think Alice echoed Gemma, but she was saying about keeping the seniors on side. And I think if you do the things you were just talking about, Phil, and I think this next slide is probably going to help, because you can demonstrate business benefits. That's certainly the way you start to get the seniors on side, isn't it?
Exactly. Yes. Data. Justin, what's your thoughts on data? Because you're going to have to, again, go through this journey with us. You know, how do you prove that this is having an impact?
Yeah, it's a really important question, and I think we can default straight towards business impact, which is the sort of the golden nugget. But I think there's a piece here around being very transparent about how much people are utilizing the system, how much are they engaging with skills, how much are they starting to use these learning offerings, or it might be content, it might be recommended learning, whether it be peer-to-peer, job shadowing, all the myriad of learning options. But if people are starting to engage with that and showcase that the skills approach within the tool is showing development of skills, for me, that's kind of rich data, even though it's not the gold nugget. It's about this is people are talking about it, people are using it, and people are seeing value in it on a personal level, a personal growth perspective. So for me, it's around having those stories, having a bit of an example of where people are changing and growing and sharing that. And then I'd be looking further into the ROI and the business impact, which you might be willing to talk more about, Phil. But for me, it's those metrics to really showcase that this is embedding, this is working, people get it and are using it.
Yeah, I mean, there's been lots of chatter over the years about vanity versus kind of success metrics, right? And I think it's easy to, I've talked about it a lot myself, done blogs on it, I've done LinkedIn posts on it, and it is something I'm quite passionate about, because, as a product person, you need to have business metrics as the ultimate success of what you've done. But those leading metrics, those big hitting numbers, if we go back to the ARR, for example, how much money are we making as an organization, you're not going to see that metric move very much in a 4-week, 8-week window. And it's very easy to go, well, what we're doing isn't having an impact, but actually some of those metrics are going, but we can see that 20% of people have closed X skill, and those same 20% of those people, their other performance metrics have moved by X%. So therefore, it's a good indicator that that metric should move. So if you see that our close rate, for example, if you were starting with sales and your close rates are starting to go up from a 20 to a 23%, it's not your success metric. It is a vanity metric if you use it for success. It's a strong leading metric if you go, what we're doing is in the right direction. If that didn't move, you go, this isn't working. These clearly aren't the skills we need. Let's reassess this and go back to basics and reevaluate. So that's my stance on it. I'm really conscious of time, and I know there's a lot of chats coming in.
I'll bring those up in a sec, because there's a couple of really good points. So as we finish, I will bring those up.
Amazing. So I do want to jump to the questions, because we've only got about 10 minutes left. So Sian, what we've got going on in the chat, I did see a really nice comment in there about almost having like a top-down a bottom-up approach here. I'm trying to find where the comment was, but it was about managers and employees.
The 360 view.
Yes.
Yeah, it is. So Michelle brought up the fact that around they actually take a more 360 view, and where do you see yourself and where does your manager see you? And I suppose this is a little bit around a little bit about bringing that whole development piece together here, isn't it? You know, it's about your performance, it's about, you know, potentially 360 conversations, and also around, you know, it's part of a program, you know, that is here. Doesn't necessarily answer the future skills part, but you wanted to just share it with us anyway. What do you think about that as a concept of that whole 360 element to the skill piece? Because I know.
So I like it. You know, I describe skills as it should be a bit of a rubber band approach. It's not just you defining what skills that person needs to perform in that role, but it's also about what skills do they bring to the table and what additional skills do they want to develop. It shouldn't all be dictated by central teams. That would be my stance on it. But equally, it's a fine balance, right? If you were to just do that, I would say you just go back and question, if they're defining that these are the skills at the levels, is that still having an impact on said metrics? Because if it's not, and those skill gaps are being closed, but it's not impacting the metrics that you need, there might just be a bit of a reassess about how you're looking at that. And is there a kind of a intervention, for want of a better word, to bring into that? But I do like that two-way approach, definitely.
Justin, from your side?
Yeah, I was just thinking it's a really interesting point, because there's an opportunity here to get the perspectives and the viewpoints of what people believe are the skills they need for the future, versus actually showing and demonstrating as an organization what skills you as a business see for the future and whether those two align. So I think that's a really, really good conversation of bringing the two together.
Yeah, I think so. And then Gemma had a nice one around, because it's about the experience of learning. We're all talking about learning experiences ultimately, and not just ticking boxes and completing e-learning or sitting in a classroom. We all know that, you know, she's absolutely right. She says, I think there's also an important positioning piece around the reality that learning alone doesn't develop a skill. Absolutely. How do we ensure that undertaking a learning session isn't qualifying someone as an expert? Really, really good thinking here, Gemma. I think, Phil, probably this absolutely will float your boat, won't it?
It definitely does. So there is, if we go back to one of those original 4 pillars that we kind of mentioned in the challenges about the confidence in the data, you're right. Just because you've done an e-learning doesn't make you an expert in something. However, if you were to use different types of content and different methodologies, for us, it's about assessing the skill in a way that you are confident in that has defined them as something. So I think there is still a valid point of saying, if you're confident that somebody has done a piece of e-learning and passed a good assessment that they are a basic inner skill, that's absolutely fine. Versus if it's maybe a more critical skill, so somebody driving a lorry or a site engineer that do safe, you know, I don't want somebody doing brain surgery on me if they've done a piece of e-learning and now they're qualified. Absolutely not. So this is where I think it's there's no single answer as to the right way to assess skills. It's what gives you the confidence that that person is what they are as a result of the learning activity they've done. And it's a combination of all of that. And I do think we need to keep considering that it's not just content. Books have been the way that I've developed most of my skills on the job, mentoring, you know, all of that good stuff. And all of that should come together in assessing that skill. And even if it's from a self-assessment point of view of an individual saying, hey, I've read a book, or I did a webinar, or I've been on an external piece of content I paid for, I now think I'm an expert. It's still driving that performance conversation with the manager and going, why is that? Like, talk to me about that. They might not necessarily understand the skill, but you could still have a conversation about that. And then if they don't understand the skill, that's when you lean back on those other measures. You should go, well, I shouldn't be signing you off as an expert if I don't know if you're an expert. So L&D team, what else do we need to do? You know, competency check, physical assessments, that sort of stuff. But what we don't want to do is to multiple choice questions are not the way to assess skills. Especially, I don't believe AI does a good enough job of being able to do that at the moment either. It's incredibly poor, I think, in writing assessment and questions. So I think that would be probably the wrong time to actually use AI. But yeah, there's no silver bullet. I think it's what gives you the confidence in the data that your skill gaps are your skill gaps.
Yeah, completely agree. Justin, anything to add there?
No, that's great. Thank you.
Oh,
Yeah.
good. All right. Probably one of the last questions. We're running, but we're okay.
Yep.
I've got a couple more. So, how do you position skills versus competence? Often used interchangeably. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Sean, I'm going to throw that to you because I think you have a lot of those conversations daily, and
Yeah.
you can
Yeah.
literally you start the conversation talking about skills, and suddenly the
And
word
actually,
competence
it's the
comes up.
competence. It is.
Yeah.
It's about demonstrating the competence to be able to do the action, the brain surgery, for example. And you need to have the knowledge and skills to be able to perform and act and redo and re-demonstrate your competence at that particular task, you know, picking up a pen right through to brain surgery. And I think there is a misunderstanding. And I think sometimes it is okay to have them interchangeably. That is okay, and accept it. And also, it's okay if the masses also talk in that way, because ultimately the goal is to get them competent in their role. Being competent in their role and being able to demonstrate it will be achieved by having multiple layers of knowledge and skill to be able to perform that action. So what I would first of all always recommend is, if you're hearing that, just have that conversation of separating them. Maybe it's a bit like the coaching versus mentor conversation.
Yeah.
Forever, isn't it? It is. It's and just being able to educate, and some of that hearts and minds piece, some of the comms piece, some of the bit about the awareness, which we talked about earlier around the maturity levels, that should be able to explain to people, and to your manager population probably is the one to get the greatest buy-in there. Very definitely around this is what the outcome is. This is what will make you competent to be able to do your role. And I think having that openness is okay, and not just accepting that they're mixed up sometimes.
Yeah, definitely. I don't think I've got anything to add to that. Justin, anything to build on it?
No, I think the only other thing is just around that narrative in terms of the story to everyone in the organisation, building on Sean's point around communication via the managers. I think when it comes to skills versus competence, and I've discussed this at length over years with various different experts, and it's been an interesting field, lots of different views. And I think the art of this is, as an organisation, what's your position on skills, competence, and behaviours? And you sit and decide that as an organisation. That's probably my main view.
Rachel's final point. Sorry, go on.
No, I was just going to say, ultimately, it doesn't matter what terminology you use. If you're all using it in the same way and the same understanding, that's what you're shooting for.
Yeah. And I think that kind of sums up in Rachel's final comment. It says, how do you position skills versus behaviours? It's the how you do something, isn't it? It's, you may have the most amazing set of KPIs, but if you're an absolute nightmare with your behaviours, and just, you know, that is how you're doing it. You may well do something very brilliant and demonstrate competency, but if your behaviours do not match that, you can demonstrate that quite easily. And having, again, I know frameworks are the way that everyone goes, but having expectations set of what those behaviours are is a first step in that, and sits alongside skills frameworks. It doesn't, you know, inhibit it. It doesn't stop it. They both should run alongside each other.
Brilliant. So we are coming up to time. I do want to just mention again that the skills readiness journey that we've mentioned and lightly touched on here, you're going to get an ebook emailed to you tomorrow. That's going to go out to everybody who signed up, which starts delving into this in a lot more detail, specifically in this skills readiness journey. It will start breaking down those different stages, those different kind of pockets of ways of thinking about skills in a much more detailed way, as in what is the focus and outcomes that you're trying to achieve from that particular thing? What does that look like? What are some of the challenges that you face in each one of those kind of key milestone areas? So keep a look out for that. Let's keep the conversation alive, of course, as well, which does keep us to the end here. Couple of things just to mention. We will be back at Learning Tech this year. So we will be there on the 23rd and 24th of April. Please do come and see us. We've got lots of exciting stuff to talk to you about, but again, very much leaning into how AI can support you in business efficiencies and business outcomes, and how you can link all of that together. We're going to put up a poll as well, just as we close out. If you would like to learn more about how Calidus can support you in the journey of managing skills and rolling that out across your organization to link to personal and business outcomes, here's a poll. Say if you would or wouldn't like to get in contact. And if you would, we'll reach out and tell you more information about what we could potentially do for you. So we'll let that run for just a moment, but otherwise, thanks everyone for joining. Skills is a big beast to try and tackle. So this is just, I think, the start of the conversation, really. And we're going to be doing much more about this. So keep an eye out. It is a hot topic and something that we're really focusing on in regards to trying to solve for customers. Sian, Justin, any final words from you?
Just a
No,
big thank you to everybody.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, Sian. Yeah.
No, go on.
Just a big thank you and a pleasure to engage with you all and understand and relate to all your challenges.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, everyone.
Amazing. Thanks, everyone. I believe that panel has closed. So we'll close the session out. Cheers all.
Bye, everyone.